Greetings everyone. Welcome to CEC Gurukul Lectures. I am Mehak Chawla, art educator, Bharatanatyam dancer and disciple of Guru Srimati Geeta Chandranji. We are going to begin with the study of southern theatre forms like Yakshagana, Terukut and Kudiyattam. So southern India displays a highly diverse theatre culture. Yakshagana from coastal Karnataka integrate dance drama, elaborate costumes and headgear, and powerful singing styles, narrating stories from the Purans and epics. Its use of live percussion, stylized movements, and energetic dialogue delivery makes it a dynamic example of community theatre. If I talk about Terukut, it's the street theatre of Tamil Nadu, in another significant tradition performed in open air village squares. Its performers use face painting, colorful costumes, rhythmic footwork, and a chorus led narration, making it a social as well as devotional event. Themes often revolve around the Mahabharata, social issues, and local legends. Now, if I speak about Kudiyattam from Kerala, which dates back to the 10th century CE as the world's oldest surviving Sanskrit theatre form, it represents a direct continuation of Nāṭyaśāstra principles, performed traditionally in temple theatres, which are known by the names of Kutambalams. It uses codified gestures, controlled body language, elaborate eye expression, techniques, and musical accompaniment rooted in ancient traditions. While the South nurtured classical leaning theatre, Eastern India developed forms rooted in Bhakti, community celebration, and narrative singing. Now let's study further about the Eastern and Northeastern theatre traditions such as Bhavana, Jatra and narrative repertories. In Assam, the saint scholar Srimanta Shankaradev developed Bhavana, a devotional musical theatre form based on Vaishnavism. It incorporates Sutradhari techniques. Sutradhari is the narrator, which is stylized with the stylized acting, symbolic costumes, and devotional songs. Bhavana blends moral teachings with entertainment and continues as an important cultural practice in monasteries. In Bengal, Jatra evolved from religious singing processions into a full-fledged theatrical form, known for its powerful vocal delivery, dramatic emotional intensity, and social commentary. Jatra deals with mythological, historical, and later modern themes. It remains one of the most popular itinerant theatre forms. From eastern central India, Pandavani, a narrative singing tradition from Chhattisgarh, features of performer narrating the Mahabharata, especially the life of Bhim, using simple props, often a thumba instrument. The dramatic shifts in voice, gestures, and rhythm make it a potent example of oral epic tradition. As eastern regions developed spiritually driven theatre, northern and western India cultivated entertainment based open air forms such as Nautanki, Tamasha, Swang, and Bhavai. So, North India is the home to multiple folk theatre traditions such as Nautanki. If we talk about Nautanki, it's from Uttar Pradesh, is famous for its melodious songs, dramatic storytelling, and themes of romance, heroism, and social issues. Swang, prevalent in Haryana and Rajasthan, relies heavily on imitative acting, humor, and musical dialogue delivery. Tamasha blends dance, music, and theatrical improvisation, known for its Lavani dance sequences and rhythmic storytelling. And this dance form is from Maharashtra. In Gujarat, Bhavai stands out for its uh, satirical style. Performers combine dance, humor, music, and dramatic exaggeration of critic social norms while entertaining the community. Bhavai's minimal props and open air staging represent the raw, unembellished essence of Indian folk theatre. Together, these regional forms, with their music, dance, math, storytelling, and dramatic techniques, ultimately feed into the evolution of classical Indian theatre, providing the social, emotional, and performative base upon which formal Sanskrit drama and later modern theatre developed. Now let's study about religious and philosophical movements and their impact on Indian arts. So religious and philosophical developments in India played a foundational role in shaping the country's performing arts, especially dance, music, theatre and visual culture. As we move chronologically through various belief systems, we see how different traditions contributed themes, aesthetics, ritual frameworks, and performative structures that later matured into the sophisticated classical arts. Understanding these movements helps students appreciate how spiritual ideas, social values, and artistic expression evolve together. Now let's study about the Vedic religion and the roots of Shaivism and Vaishnavism. The earliest influential tradition was the Vedic religion, where the ritual practices such as yagya, chanting, and sacred hymns shaped early modes of performance. The Samved, in particular, established melodic structures that form the earliest foundation of Indian music. Over time, Vedic belief diversified into Shaivism and Vaishnavism, which became deeply influential in later dance tradition. Their mythological narratives, the cosmic dance of Shiva, Krishna Leelas, Vishnu avatars, provided some of the most enduring themes of classical dance and dramatic performances. Iconography such as Shiva performing Tandava and Krishna dancing with gopis began to inform sculptural poses, narrative compositions, and movement vocabulary. As Vedic traditions evolved, new philosophical systems like Buddhism emerged with distinct aesthetic and performative ideas, broadening the cultural landscape. Now, if we study about the Buddhism, its narrative, ritual, and transcultural influence, Buddhism offered a very different artistic sensibility. Instead of the fire rituals, Buddhist expression centered on narrating storytelling, chanting, monastic performances, and ritual dance. The Jataka tells stories of previous births of the Buddha became major sources for sculptural reliefs, mural paintings, and performative storytelling. In some of Buddhist traditions, ritual dances evolved into early forms of Charya Nritya, an esoteric performance within Vajrayana Buddhism. These practices emphasize symbolic movement, meditative rhythm, and storytelling with moral purpose. Buddhism spread across Sri Lanka, Myanmar, Thailand, Cambodia, and Indonesia, meant that Indian performing art strongly influenced Southeast Asian dance theatre. Visible even today in their mudras, narrative styles, costumes, and musical patterns. Parallel to Buddhism, Jainism contributed another dimension: ethical restraint, subtle beauty, and disciplined artistic expression. Now let's study about Jainism, its ethical aesthetics and storytelling traditions. Jain artistic philosophy emphasized ahimsa, the non-violence, simplicity, and moral clarity, which shaped its visual and performative traditions. Jain temples feature intricately carved dance and music scenes, yet with a distinct restraint and balance reflecting Jain values. Jain storytelling traditions such as Prabandhas influence narrative theatre by promoting ethical dilemmas, moral tales, and philosophical dialogues. The Jain focus on clarity of gestures, symbolism, and narrative purity contributed significantly to performance traditions that prioritized subtlety over theatrical exaggeration. As Jain and Buddhist influences continued, a new phenomenon began to reshape Indian art entirely: the rise of Bhakti, centered on personal devotion expressed through music and dance. Now let's study about the early Bhakti movement. The Bhakti movement marks a turning point in Indian artistic history, beginning with the Tamil Alvars, Vaishnavite poet saints, and Nayanmars, who are the Shaivite saint. Bhakti emphasized emotional devotion expressed through song, poetry, and movement. The hymns of Tevaram and Divya Prabandham began to be sung in temples, giving rise to structured temple music traditions. Dance became an integral part of worship, performed by temple dancers whose movements embodied devotion, narrative expression, and ritual service. Bhakti created a powerful cultural bridge between folk, classical, and ritual performance. Its influence contributed directly to the later development of classical forms such as Bharatnatyam, Odissi, Kuchipudi, and regional devotional theatre traditions. The movement also democratized the arts by making them accessible to common people, shifting focus from courtly patronage to community participation. Together, these religious and philosophical systems, Vedic, Buddhist, Jain, and Bhakti, provided the thematic, spiritual, and aesthetic foundations upon which classical Indian performing arts were built. Now, let's study about the texts which are important for performing arts. The study of Indian performing arts is deeply rooted in long textual traditions that documents, analyzes, and refines artistic practice across centuries. These texts help us understand how movement, music, expression, and theatre developed into the sophisticated classical systems we know today. They also reveal how theory and practice intricated, how performers inspired text, and how text in turn guided performers. To begin with, the very first text we are going to study about is Nāṭyaśāstra. The foundational treatise. The Nāṭyaśāstra, traditionally attributed to Bharata Muni, occupies a foundational position in the study of Indian performing arts. It is not merely a manual of dance or drama, but a comprehensive aesthetic philosophy that integrates Natya, which is drama, Nritta, which is pure dance, Nritya, which is expressive dance, Gita, music, and Vadya, which is instrumentation, into a single coherent system. The text presents performance as a sacred and socially significant activity believed to have divine origins, created to educate, entertain, and morally uplift society. Through this vision, Bharata establishes performing arts as a disciplined knowledge system rather than a purely recreational practice. A central contribution of the Nāṭyaśāstra is the systematic explanation of Abhinaya, divided into four interrelated modes: Angika Abhinaya, which is body movement and gestures. Then comes Vachika Abhinaya, which is speech, song, and verbal expression. Then Aharya Abhinaya, which is costume, makeup, props, and stage decor. And last one is Sattvika Abhinaya, which is inner emotional states expressed through subtle physical signs. This framework allows students to understand how external technique and internal emotion function together in performance. The text further provides detailed classification of hand gestures, which is hasta mudras, postures, the sthanas, movement, which is chari, and karanas, which later became the building blocks of classical dance vocabularies across India. At the heart of the Nāṭyaśāstra lies the celebrated Rasa Bhava theory, which explains the aesthetic goal of performance. Bharata proposes that the performer expresses bhava, which, when skillfully presented, evoke rasa, the aesthetic relish, in the spectator. The 8 primary rasas, which later expanded to the 9, articulate a shared emotional experience between performer and audience, establishing the spectator as an active participant in the artistic process. This theory remains central to understanding Indian aesthetics and is repeatedly referenced in later texts, performance, traditions, and critical discourse. The treatise also addresses music and rhythm, discussing early concepts of tala, melodic organization, instruments, and vocal practice, alongside detailed instruction on theatre architecture, stage layout, rehearsal methods, and audience composition. It provides the theatrical backbone against which later regional styles, texts, and traditions can be studied. Almost all subsequent works on dance, drama, and music, whether Sanskrit, Prakrit, or regional, either build upon, reinterpret, or respond to Bharata's principle, confirming the Nāṭyaśāstra as the bedrock of Indian performing art theory. As artistic practices expanded and regional styles gained prominence, new theoretical needs emerged, especially in music. This led to texts that highlighted evolving melodic structures and local traditions, the most important being Bṛhaddeśī. The emergence of Deshi music and the raga concept. Matanga Muni's Bṛhaddeśī occupies a crucial position in the evolution of Indian music theory, as it marks the transition from whole Indian classical ideals of regionally rooted musical practices, while the Nāṭyaśāstra laid down universal aesthetic and structural principles. Bṛhaddeśī formally introduces the distinction between Margi, which is the classical style, and Deshi, the regional folk-based practices, acknowledging the growing diversity of musical expression across different regions. Its most significant contribution in the early and systematic articulation of the raga concept, where melody is no longer understood merely as a scale but as an emotionally charged musical entity with a distinct personality. Matanga explains how specific note, arrangements, movements, and intonation evoke particular moods, thereby linking musical structure directly to aesthetic experience. The text reflects a historical phase when local musical traditions were gaining prominence and being theorized within a classical framework, demonstrating the dynamic interaction between formal theory and lived performance practice. Bṛhaddeśī is essential for understanding how Indian music evolved from abstract theory into expressive, regionally nuanced traditions that later shaped both Hindustani and Carnatic systems. This text reflects a cultural moment when regional musical practices were becoming more defined, illustrating the vibrant interaction between classical structures and local creativity. Parallel to developments in music, literary traditions in southern India were contributing richly to performance theory, especially in understanding dance, training methods, and musical systems. This brings us to Silappadikāram. Silappadikāram, one of the most earliest Tamil epics, attributed to Elango Adigal, is an invaluable literary source for understanding early South Indian performing arts. Unlike purely theoretical treatises, this text offers lived descriptions of performance practice, making it especially important for students of dance and music history. The epic provides detailed references to dance techniques, movement patterns, emotional expression, and stage context, revealing how performances were embedded within social, ritual, and courtly life. It elaborates on the pun system, an early melodic framework that later influenced the development of South Indian raga tradition, and discusses rhythmic structures, instruments, and musical accompaniment. Particularly significant are its description of the training of dancers, their costumes, ornaments, and expressive capacities, showing a highly evolved performance culture. By integrating narrative storytelling with music and dance, Silappadikāram demonstrates how literary compositions and performance were inseparable in early Tamil society, offering crucial insights into the regional foundations of Indian classical arts. By the medieval period, these diverse intellectual streams, classical theory, regional musical tradition, and literary performance descriptions were synthesized into more elaborate treatises. The most influential among them is Saṅgīta Ratnākara. Sarangadev's Saṅgīta Ratnākara occupies a pivotal position in the history of Indian performing arts as a comprehensive synthesis of early theoretical knowledge that emerging medieval practices. This text systematically brings together vocal music, Gita, instrumental music, Vadya, and dance, Nritta and Nritya, into a unified aesthetic framework, building upon foundations laid by Nāṭyaśāstra and later musical treatises. Sarangadev elaborates in detail on melodic organization through ragas, the nuanced use of gamakas, the ornamentation, and an extensive classification of talas, many of which continue to influence both Hindustani and Carnatic tradition. Importantly, for performing art students, the text also addresses dance movements, bodily coordination, and performance structure, reinforcing the inseparable relationship between music and movement. Because it was widely studied and commented upon across regions, the Saṅgīta Ratnākara became a common reference point for diverse artistic lineages, helping to standardize concepts which still allowing regional interpretation. This text is crucial for understanding how Indian performing art evolved through continuity rather than rupture, where classical theory, regional practice, and lived performance traditions intersected to shape the rich musical and dance forms seen today. Together, these texts trace a long intellectual journey from early codification in the Nāṭyaśāstra to refinement of melodic system in Bṛhaddeśī, the literary richness of Silappadikāram, and the expansive synthesis of Saṅgīta Ratnākara. They reveal how Indian art grew through a dialogue between theory, practice, classical structure, and regional diversity, and ancient foundations and evolving traditions. So, to conclude, this historical journey traced in this lecture reveals that Indian performing arts did not evolve in isolation but emerged through a continuous and deeply interconnected dialogue between ritual, religion, philosophy, political patronage, regional culture, and theoretical codification. From the early medieval period onwards, performance traditions matured into complex systems where dance, music, theatre, architecture, sculptures, and devotion functioned as a unified cultural expression rather than separate art forms. With this, I conclude my lecture. Thank you.